Final Stop Brazil. Chapter 18. Racism, Tony's baby. Tony didn't smoke and didn't like too much to see me smoking. Therefore, I smoked much less or not at all when I was with him. But now I needed a cigarette. I felt like something was cutting my ear off. "Tony, why didn't you respond to Maggie's question?" Tony got up from the bed and prepared 2 whiskies with Coke. He handed me a glass, gave me the usual cheers for toasting, sat slowly down the glass and began, "Baby, I love you, you know that, but I cannot marry you." At that moment tears entered my eyes. "Why, Tony, why?" He put his arm around me and continued, "Baby, do you remember what you told me on Monday on the phone? The problem with your parents? Was it not so? What my parents think, I don't care. I love you, Tony, and I want to stay with you forever," I protested. But Tony made a sign that I should continue to listen to him. "Baby, my parents and the rest of my family would react the same way. It would be inconceivable for them if I would marry a white woman. Even if I don't care what mine or your family is thinking about it, it is simply not possible. Here in Germany, millions of people think like your parents, and in New York, I wouldn't be able to show myself on the street together with a white woman. I could be killed for it, or at least be beaten up." Stunned in disbelief, and with tear-stained face, I stared at Tony. "Where and in which century are we living? America, the country of unlimited opportunities," I laughed sarcastically. "There are black and white couples getting married here, and there are also mixed marriages in America. Tony, I can't believe this." "Baby, the couples getting married here don't think about the consequences. Especially the children of those marriages suffer all their lives because they belong neither to the white nor the black society. Sure, there are mixed marriages in the United States. Musicians, actors, people with a lot of money, or in Florida, in California. Racial segregation is officially long gone. We use buses and trains just like the whites, go to the same schools, in the same clubs, and in the same restaurants, but blacks in the company of blacks, and the whites among them." Tony picked up a Kleenex and wiped the tears from her face. "So there is no future for us," I wept openly. "Does it mean that it's over between us? Tony, I love you more than anything else in the world. You are the first and only man for whom I feel so much. I don't know how I could live without you. I could never love anyone else but you." I sobbed and threw myself into his arms in despair. "Baby, think about your daughter. With a stepfather like me, she would be an outsider everywhere, anywhere." For the first time, the thought passed that Kathy could also grow up with her father, because without Tony I could not live. I expressed these thoughts, and Tony gently patted my hair. "Baby, don't say anything like that. A child belongs to her mother. Baby, I love you too, and never thought that I would ever feel so much for you. Separating me from you is the last thing I want. No, it's not over. I am still here, and perhaps there is indeed a solution for us. The only one thing I don't want is to lie to you or raise false hopes in you." Tony pulled me close to him, kissed me tenderly, and we made love that night again and again. Desperately clinging to Tony, I still couldn't stop my tears from flowing. Again and again, Tony whispered, "Stop crying, baby, I love you." After about 2 hours of sleep, I woke up in Tony's arms. For several minutes, I watched him as he slept peacefully. Oh God, how much I loved this man. No way that I could imagine a life without him. Again my eyes filled with tears. Because one thing was clear. From now on, nothing would ever be the same. A love without a future. One day, Tony would return to the States and abandon me just like that. This dark cloud would be permanently hanging over our love. Only with difficulty I forced myself to get up, showered, and washed my hair with Tony's shampoo Afro Shine, which always gave my hair an extra shine. I prepared coffee and toast for us, lit a cigarette, opened the window, as I noticed that British guards were patrolling right in front of Tony's window, repeatedly throwing a glance at the window. It surprised me a little, but I didn't waste further thought of it. I woke Tony up with a kiss. He blinked at me sleepily and sighed, "Oh, baby." He pulled me into his bed, but I pushed him gently aside. "You know that I must go home to Kathy, and also return the car to Margaret." He stood up, also cast a glance out the window, and frowned. Strange. What are the Brits doing here? We got the response as we walked out of the barracks. "Sergeant Polite, Mrs. Disney, please follow us to the guardhouse." Astonished, we looked at each other. We didn't have an explanation, however, of what they wanted from us. In the guardroom, there were several officers of the British Army next to the superior of Tony and military police waiting for us. Tony was led to another room by the MPs, while they explained to me about our offense. As the wife of a British soldier in the British Army, I was having an affair with a member of the US Armed Forces, and therefore both of us had admitted a great moral offense, for which they, however, would not be able to punish me, nor would be wanting to do so. Incredulous, I asked, "Pardon me, you are telling me I am a wife of a British soldier? This is surely a joke, right? For over 2 years I am separated from this man, and I'm waiting every day for the divorce date. I don't even live here in Mendon, and anyway, what's all this? The army has confirmed to me very well that I don't belong to the British Armed Forces by a letter, informing me that my driver's license has no validity anymore. I held this against these men. Therefore, I am, according to the British Army, a free woman and can do what I want and sleep when and with whom I want," I provoked. "Yes, that's right. You are and can also do just what you want, but not here in the barracks, as long as you are not officially divorced. Sergeant Polite should know that he cannot have an affair with a married woman, and certainly not get involved with the wife of a British soldier. This is a punishable offense, and as a sergeant that weighs much more heavily, for he has, with his rank, a role of an example ahead of the other soldiers." I was sure that Ian was behind all this. For 2 years he tried to delay the divorce. I was outraged and shouted at the men they had better throw an eye on what was happening between some neighborly relations in the army flats, because I saw plenty of times how husbands and women were changing their partners in the neighborhood like shirts, and not to show themselves off as moralists in our case. One of the MPs asked me to mute my voice, and now please leave the barracks. I sheepishly asked, "What is going to happen with Sergeant Polite?" "Sergeant Polite will receive an appropriate discipline punishment." I tried to save the situation as best as I could. "But Sergeant Polite didn't know that I'm still married. We've never talked about it." "I doubt this," said its high-level officer of the British Army. "The two entities work close together, and there already had been plenty enough talk." As if in trance, I went home. I couldn't see Tony anymore, and only when Margaret and Dietmar came to me, my paralysis broke, and I told them in tears what happened. Both tried to console me. "Tony is a really nice guy," interjected Dietmar. Margaret took me into her arms to comfort me when everything burst out of me. The abuse of my mother and the behavior of my parents, as if I was a serious criminal, simply because I loved a man with a different color. Then the conversation with Tony, my despair, everything. "I'm so sorry for you, Rita, and it would be stupid to tell you now that you should have known this before, but unfortunately I cannot deny that I knew something like this would happen. Margaret said softly, I love Tony. Without him, I can't and I don't want to live. Tony is the great love of my life, I sobbed. I know this, Rita. For you there is nothing and no one besides Tony. But what will happen when he returns to the States? Or he will be thinking that no woman in the world is worth so much trouble as he has now. Your both lives are just too different. I've always wanted to tell you this. When it began, I saw something like this happening to you. Even if you love him, you have to think of yourself, and especially of Kathy. Margaret continued, but I hardly heard her words. The following days were awfully empty. I suffered so much that I wasn't even able to work, got a sick note by the doctor, and sat at home for days, dazing, forcing myself only with difficulty to provide for Kathy. If the phone rang, I immediately picked it up, always waiting for a call from Tony. No phone call, nothing, and my panic they would send him back to the States was getting greater. During the weekend, I didn't even get up. The TV was running, but I didn't follow the program. Then finally a call came. It wasn't Tony, but Sammy, who called me to give me a message from Tony, that he loved and missed me terribly. I asked Sammy what they did to Tony. Sammy laughed and told me that they had given Tony 3 weeks of house arrest, without providing service, because he was locked in his room. This time also would be deducted from his pay. Don't worry, Tony is a strong guy. He'll come out to be that old buddy like before. Serious, he added, he really loves you, you know. This took a 100-weight load off my heart, even though I suffered with him in my mind. This humiliation in front of colleagues and the GIs had to be awful for him. Please tell him from me that I love him forever and miss him so terribly, I told Sammy. I really missed him, but my life somehow went on, and I lived for the day when I would see him again. My friends stuck to me, but in their eyes I could read, we have known it. There would be trouble. With my parents I still didn't talk. One day Margaret surprised me with the news that she had separated from Dietmar. He was very brutal and had beaten her more often recently. Stunned, I listened to her and asked her finally why she had never said anything before. Oh, you know, I just felt ashamed. Who likes to admit to be beaten up? Especially if one is so stupid like me and believes that it will not happen again. He had promised it so often. Again I thought of Tony. In more than 2 years we had been together. Up to now, he bent not even a single hair of mine. I never even heard an evil word of him. Tony showed no signs of violence, or that he could become violent. Of course, if we made love, then he went wild sometimes. But if he felt that he hurt me, or just thought he did, at once he was tender and affectionate. 2 long weeks had already passed when Sammy called me again. Rita, can you come here? Now? I got a huge fright and asked what had happened. Nothing has happened, laughed Sammy. Just come here. I'll explain it to you then. But can you make it until 10:30? Yes, of course, I stammered, and I said goodbye in a hurry. A glance at the clock made me jump. It was already 9:15. Kathy was sleeping, so I gave the keys hastily to the neighbor with the excuse of urgency. I didn't run. I practically flew up the road to the snack bar of Margaret, hoping to meet her there, but luck was on my side. I need your car, urgently, I gasped, out of breath. No, nothing happened. I would explain everything later. Caught the car keys she threw at me, and the next moment sat inside the car to race at full speed towards Menden. With a fast Opel Ascona, I could easily make it. At 10:20, I parked the car on the road to the rear gate of the barracks, like Sammy had asked me to do, who already waited for me there, grinning as I climbed out of the car. He gave me a sign to turn around, and when I did so, I saw the shadow in the dark which moved out of the bushes towards me. Tony. I ran straight into his arms, threw my arms around his neck, and he met me with a long, passionate kiss. Hey, hey, hey! Take it easy, you two. Tony, you got until 11:30. I'll give you a whistle. Sammy advised and disappeared into the darkness. Inquiring, I looked at Tony, who told me they had bribed the guards that they wouldn't see how he climbed over the back gate. At 11:30, the guards will change, then I have to be back again. Sammy is watching and whistles if something is wrong. He grinned like a little boy who's done something wrong. And how did you get out of your room? I wanted to know. Sammy and another buddy organized the keys. I had to laugh. You're crazy. Yep, crazy about you. I was really going crazy inside. I missed you so much. Just needed to see you, baby. With these words, he pulled me close to him, and we stood there this 1 hour, holding each other firmly embraced and kissed. In between, Tony gasped, I love you, baby. The time rushed by, and as we heard Sammy's whistle, it seemed to me as if only 5 minutes had passed. One more hurried kiss yet, and Tony was gone, disappeared into the darkness. Overjoyed, I drove home. When Tony was so mad to risk life and limb just to see me for 1 hour, he would never be able to return to the States and just leave me. I was sure of this, love, now, and that nothing and no one would separate us. Moral support I received suddenly from an entirely different corner. My sister Elke stood at my door. We had not seen for almost a month now. Hello, you outcast black sheep of the family. She busied herself with Kathy while I put on coffee for us, but then began. Once again you have resorted to the fall, but one thing I must give you, you have courage. Restrained, I asked her, turning offensive. What does this have to do with courage? I love Tony, and I don't give a damn what others think about it. That's what I mean. It takes a lot of courage to hold on. I still wasn't sure what she was up to, or whether she had been sent from her parents. Faltering, she admitted that she also found Negroes, African Americans, I corrected for the upteenth time, very attractive. Also, she had never seen them close. Unmoved, I suggested her to drive to Mendon and go into the disco. But I was quite amazed when she confided to me that she'd never been to a disco. At the age of 28, although happily married but never been in a disco and otherwise not seen much of life. I commented somewhat sarcastically, but then she let her bomb burst. Happily married? Nothing like it. I'm already fed up for a long time. The only thing that Rainer does is consuming countless bottles of beer. Otherwise, nothing happens. Everything else on my side is just camouflage. I don't want to upset our parents. I had to agree with her. This was far from an exciting life. At weekends, they either sat around with our parents or with her in-laws. The vacation was regularly passed at the Baltic Sea, and even there Elke's husband transported more crates of beer than luggage in the trunk of the car. Not exactly an exciting life, oh? What else could I say? But I noticed that Elke simply needed someone to express herself. Why don't you file for divorce? And don't tell me because of our parents. But that was exactly the reason. She didn't want to hurt or disappoint our parents. Bingo. There it was again. My sister felt exactly as I did when I was living with Ian. How could it be that our parents were dominating our lives in such extreme way and made us go through hell for them? What gave them the right to do this to us? The Oldens have other worries at the moment anyway. Carmen and Alvin are filing for divorce the second time around. As you know, there's a big problem again. Alvin has another woman. Also, I couldn't even blame my brother-in-law. Perhaps he was only looking for love he certainly didn't find with my sister, who was cold as ice and calculating. My thoughts wandered back to Tony. He didn't smoke nor drink, took no drugs, was not violent. He was a professional in a superposition, and that he didn't betray me. I would put my hands into fire. In short, if he was a white man, he would have been the perfect husband in the eyes of society. But he was black, and that was a decisive point. I'd really like to go to a disco for once. Elke interrupted my thoughts. When are you going back there? I got that message. If you want, I can go with you on Saturday. Although I had no desire at all, I took my sister to my regular disco, which was full of African Americans, who became immediately aware of the new face. Soon we were in company of 3 Americans inviting us for drinks. I was not feeling well, although I knew Tony wouldn't mind. He never did if I went out with friends to the disco while he was on duty or on exercise. He confided in me just as I trusted him. The guys were boring me, and the interpretation I did for my sister, because she neither spoke English nor did she know how to dance. Besides, I took it my task to keep an eye on my 5-year-old sister. For many of the Yanks, I couldn't necessarily trust them one bit. Shortly after midnight, I pushed and shoved her to go home. My sister was really excited about the interesting night and the handsome guys. She remarked, "We could have had them buying us drinks the entire night." "Yes, they have plenty of money. They can afford it." "Where's your boyfriend tonight?" she asked suddenly. "Oh, he's on duty," I lied. A week later, when the disciplinary action was finally over, I was overjoyed to be meeting Tony in our disco. But when I arrived and met Tony, I hardly recognized him. Absolutely drunk, he staggered past me. While passing by, he gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and said casually, "Hi baby, how are you?" With those words, he simply left me standing there and walked up to his friends to discuss something with them. I could barely hide my disappointment and anger. Rosie came up to me and told me, "They are planning something. I think they want to go to another disco." "Which one?" I asked her, but she didn't want to give me an answer at first, afraid to get problems with Sammy. I grabbed her by both shoulders, suddenly panic rising in me. "Which disco?" Reluctantly she told me, "Point 1 in Hema. You know where it is?" Not yet, but soon I would find out where it was. Tony came staggering back to me and murmured, "I'm going to the barracks with the guys. I'm tired." The kiss he was about to give me landed on my cheek as I turned my face away. Shrugging, he merely remarked, "I'll call you tomorrow." He left me standing there just like that. What on earth had happened to him? Never before had he lied to me, and my terror of losing him was rising, but I would fight for him. I would not allow what was happening now. I had tears in my eyes as I looked for a taxi. I left Margaret's car in the parking lot. Rosie followed me and tried to stop me. "Don't follow them. It's going to make it worse, Rita." Wasn't it bad enough already? What had merely driven into Tony? When I took a taxi, I gave the driver instructions where to take me, and during the trip, tears were rolling down my face. Wasn't Tony happy to see me again? More than 3 endless weeks we were separated, and now he avoided me. In more than 2 years we were together. I never saw him drunk. I knew only of this one time when I didn't come to the party in the barracks. But he never ever hurt me or humiliated me like this evening. But I would not give him up like that. I would fight for my love. After I paid the taxi driver, I went trembling to the front door of this nightclub. I didn't know, and could already hear the black music playing. I paid admission, but remained standing at the entrance. It was not difficult to discern Tony in the almost empty disco. Undecidedly, he strolled from one corner into another. His friends were on the other side at the bar. My gaze fell again in the direction of Tony, and I froze. A girl came up to Tony and spoke to him. She pointed to a table. Tony followed her, sat down beside her, and put his arm around her. I saw red, or to be better, saw black, because of what happened from that moment on. Since I had an absolute blackout, I no longer knew neither what I was doing, but later learned by the narrations of Tony's friends. Like I was mesmerized, I walked towards the table, grabbing an empty beer bottle of some other table. At that moment, Sammy and the others had seen me, but it probably took a few seconds until they assessed the situation. Seconds too late, because by the time Sammy and the others had jumped across the tables and ran in my direction, I already had smashed the bottle over the girl's head. I saw nothing, only heard somebody shout, "Military police, and get her out of here." I just came back as I sat in Sammy's car, Tony beside me. Excited, the guys talked to me and wanted to know why I did it. They accused me that I could have brought them all in great difficulties. But then they noticed that I was totally confused, and only after I came to my senses, I grasped a clear idea of what was going on. Foaming with rage and desperation, I started beating Tony. "It's all your fault," I shouted at him, while he was busy trying to hold my arms and protect himself from my blows. I'm so sorry," he stammered again and again. But my anger and disappointment were just too much. Why did you do that? Why?" I cried and tried to rid me of Tony's arms. "Why did you hurt me like that?" Tony finally managed to get me under control, his arms clinging to me so tightly that I could barely even move. Again and again he kissed me and let my resistance slowly melt, until I completely gave in by his kisses. Sammy asked, "What now? Where should we go now?" Until then he was just aimlessly driving through the area. "Back to the barracks," Tony ordered, whereupon Sammy protested, "You know well that you're not allowed to take Rita with you inside the barracks." Tony didn't answer. Instead, his kisses were becoming wilder, more challenging, and he let my hand to his penis. I felt how excited he was. He opened his pants and began to push my head down. "Suck my dick, baby." Again, a boundless rage rose up in me, and I brusquely pulled my hand back. "Who do you think you're dealing with? I've told you once before that I'm not one of these sluts that hang around in these discos, and you can check them up to fuck them in front of your friends." I shouted at him again and addressed to Sammy, "Take me to the car. I want to go home." Tony closed silently the zipper of his pants and turned away from me to stare out the window. I realized it was over. This was not Tony I loved so much. I wept bitter tears. Concerned, Sammy asked me if I really wanted to go home in my state. Tony doesn't know what he's doing. Silently, I climbed out of the car and heard as Tony called after me, "Baby." One last time, I turned around and shouted, "Fuck off, we are finished." The weeks after were worse for me than anything previously. It was as if I had fallen into a deep black hole. I hid myself, took hardly any notice of Kathy, even though I had to take care of her. Tony phoned several times, and then he made Sammy call me because I slammed the phone down when I heard his voice. Sammy begged me again and again, "Give him another chance, he loves only you." But my pain was too deep, and the shock of what this love had driven me to, I, rejecting any kind of violence, had been able to offend another person. I went out no more, just sat around at home, not wanting to see anyone. Elke, however, had started to call me regularly, using me as her emotional dustbin. That way, it didn't stay hidden to her that it was over between Tony and me, and must have had stuck it to my parents. One afternoon, my mother spoke to me as I silently picked up Kathy at her door. "Are you finally becoming reasonable? Come on in, I just made coffee." Perhaps everyone else was indeed right, and I was wrong. Maybe we really were too different. But one stood firmly for me. My love for Tony was unchanged, and I would love him forever. There would never be another man for me. One night, when I automatically took the pill from the pack, just like everything I did these days automatically, to swallow it, the thought struck me that it didn't make any sense at all to use it, so I threw the whole pack in the dustbin. 4 weeks had passed already, but it still hurt me, the same as in the night of our separation. When my doorbell rang, I automatically pressed the buzzer, but when I heard these all too familiar steps, how he was taking 2 steps at a time, my heart began to race. Tony. We just fell into each other's arms. Tony pushed me gently back into the apartment, closed the door with a kick, and murmured, apologizing, "I'm so sorry, baby. I was such an idiot. I didn't know what I was doing. Please believe me." Passionately, we were kissing. My face was wet with tears. Affectionately, Tony pushed me on my bed and kissed the tears from my face. "Stop crying, baby. I'm with you. I love you. I love you so much. I was going crazy without you." While he slowly undressed me, I clung so tightly to him, as if I would never let him go again. I saw his beautiful naked body before me and realized how much I really had missed him. Like 2 wild, hungry animals, we fell into each other and made love so fiercely as never before. Everything around me was forgotten. Tony touched me with tenderness and implored to me, "I need you so much, baby. I know now just how much I love you. Never again will I let you go." We made love that night again and again, so wildly and passionately, as if to make up in this one night for all the nights we had missed. Hilariously, we laughed as Tony vowed that he would never again put other women in danger by his own jealous woman, who smashed beer bottles on the heads of anyone who came too close to a man. But then he became serious again and explained that he had been going crazy during these 3 weeks of arrest. On top of it, he had to deal with the talking of his colleagues and friends, that he should separate from me. Again and again, he had to listen to those things like, "German girls are good to fuck, but not to have a serious relationship with." It was all too much for him. And when the 3 weeks were over, he just got himself drunk without thinking, and instead of waiting for me. Suspicious, I asked if he already knew the girl before. Tony swore that he had never seen her before. She had just walked up and spoken to him in that disco. What would have happened if I hadn't turned up there? Would you have slept with her? I persisted. Tony looked into my eyes and replied, "Baby, I will not lie. Frankly, I do not know. Maybe yes, maybe no. You know that I have never deceived you, but after 3 weeks without sex, it just happened that a fuse had blown. I didn't want to hurt you, and I'll never hurt you again. Forgive me, please." "It is already forgotten," I muttered between our kisses. Everything was as before, and I was overjoyed. Tony would never separate from me. Of this I was sure now. A few weeks later, I noticed that my usually regular menstruation was absent. First I reassured myself, but then I remembered what I already had forgotten in my tumble of love and happiness, namely, the fact that I had stopped taking the pill. It didn't take long, and I was sick to the point of vomiting with every cigarette I lit. But still, I tried to ignore what no longer was to be ignored. Even my colleagues at work already started whispering, when I followed my habit, forgetting about my dismay and lit a cigarette to throw it away the very next moment, running to the toilet, throwing up. Finally, I went to see the doctor and performed a pregnancy test. Of course, the test was positive. The doctor told me I was in the 8th week of pregnancy. When I counted back, I realized that the child was conceived on the night of our reconciliation. The child. Only now I realized that I was expecting a child. Tony's baby. Conceived in love. I remembered how I became pregnant with Kathy. Not a trace of love at that time, and in fact, I didn't even want a child. And now, did I want this child? Tony's baby? I wanted it. Yes, I wanted a child from my great love, Tony. But him, would he want it? I remembered Tony's words. These children suffer all their lives because they are neither included in the black nor the white society. But things were now quite different. Tony and I loved each other and knew that we belonged together, no matter what should happen. I was convinced that our love would give the child enough force to face any hostile action. Meanwhile, I was also divorced, and therefore there existed no more obstacles for a marriage with Tony. Confidently, I called Tony on his duty telephone and asked him to come and see me because I had something urgent to discuss with him. What's the matter, baby? Of course, I didn't tell him the news over the phone, but this night he was assigned as guard and consoled me for the next day. Nevertheless, I didn't stay alone this evening. Kitty, my former colleague and friend, visited me. She immediately noticed a change about me. Above all that, I no longer smoked, and inadvertently contorted my face in disgust as she lit a cigarette. I could hardly stand the smell of cigarette smoke without feeling sick. At first, she looked at me, astonished, but then stated the next moment, "You're pregnant." Silently, I nodded my head. After Kitty had recovered her speech, I had to listen to everything I had already heard 1,000 times. It was always the same, black and white, poor child, and that Kathy would suffer most, and we would be absolute outsiders, that our society didn't accept half-caste children, and. At the conclusion of her speech, she asked me, "How does your Tony think about it? You know that you're going to need a lot of strength to stand by your decision and to the child. But whatever you decide, I'm with you." For this, I hugged my motherly friend. Tony still hasn't got a blink of an idea of his fatherly joys. I can only tell him tomorrow. How he will take it, I don't know, I said, insecure. The next evening, I waited nervously, after preparing one of Tony's favorite meals for him. Would he be happy about our child, or would he need some time to get used to the idea of being a father? I tried to encourage myself that he wouldn't take it all too bad, but the memory of our conversation and how he felt about mixed-blood children urged again and again into my thoughts. When he finally arrived, I was shaking with nervousness and insecurity. As always, he showed his beaming smile as he kissed me. "Hi, baby, what's up? Why did you want to talk to me?" I didn't want to beat around the bush, took all my courage and started, "Tony, I'm going to have your baby." Tony's smile froze on his face. "What?" I repeated it, because I wasn't sure if he hadn't understood me correctly. At first he was silent, and then he seemed to have realized what I was saying. "Rita," he began, and if he said Rita, it was serious. "Do you want to say that you're pregnant?" "Since when?" I didn't know what he was getting at. "Since the night we reconciled." "But you take the pill. How could this happen?" He asked this question in a tone as if I had committed a murder. "I stopped taking the pill then because I thought it was over with us." He shook his head incredulously. "So that means that you are at the beginning of the 3rd month. That still leaves us time for an abortion. Look, my friend has an address of a doctor in Dortmund. I will get it of him. Don't worry about any costs. I'll pay, of course." Now I was the one who stared at him incredulously. As simple as that, the issue was settled for him, that he didn't even consider the possibility of having the child. "Tony, I want this child. I don't want an abortion. This child is of you, and I love you." He looked at me and then said, "Have you forgotten how I feel about it? I already told you my opinion about it. I will not put a half-bred bastard in the world." These words were like a punch. "Tony, this is your child. How can you say something awful like this? We love each other, and you have repeatedly said we will find a solution." Desperately, I tried to convince him. "Yes, it's true. I said this. But I meant the two of us. I never claimed that I wanted a child, and certainly not in our relationship. The discussion degenerated into a violent and noisy quarrel. I wept, but Tony was adamant. If you want the child, please, it's your decision. But then I'm out. You have the choice, either the child or me. That was too much for me, and I pointed to the door. Quietly, I just said, get out. Then Tony walked slowly towards the door. There he turned around and said, sadly and gently, think about it, baby. With that he left, and this was the last I saw of him for a long time. I went through hell. The only person who knew about my state and the painful separation from Tony was Kitty, and she was seriously worried about me. Several times a week she dropped by in order to extricate me from my depression, and always talking to me that I would have to make a decision very soon, making it clear to me that I was alone now with a pregnancy, and to make matters worse in this small town. She kept reminding me how much this child and also Kathy would suffer. But first I insisted on wanting this child at all costs. It shouldn't have been in vain that I lost Tony. His child was a part of him, which nobody could take away from me, and I loved it already. Anyhow, images of the horrified faces of my parents and the entire family, neighbors, and even friends came mixing into my thoughts. Therefore, I became insecure. How could I ever get away from this small town of racists, which I hated if I had 2 children? And would it really be better elsewhere, with 1 white and 1 black child? It was already a great shame if a mother had 2 children of different fathers, not to mention if there were different skin colors in the game. Suddenly I realized that Tony was absolutely right, but to deny his own child in such lousy way, without giving us the slightest chance, this I could not forgive him. So I informed Kitty on the phone about my decision for an abortion. Kitty stood by my side up to the end. First, she accompanied me to the doctor, who was not thrilled, because I was already in the 4th month. Up to the 3rd month, an abortion was already legal in Germany, under certain conditions. The prerequisite for this was a conversation with the consultants of Pro Familia. Only after this, the doctor was allowed to exhibit the indication for the termination of pregnancy. In the family planning department, I almost turned back on my decision when they offered me all sorts of resources. They would support me financially and with all kinds of other things, such as the entire equipment for the baby. They promised me heaven on earth if I only didn't abort the child. But these people couldn't have any idea of the true reason for my decision, and I didn't tell them because I was ashamed. Not for the color of the child, no. I was ashamed of myself, that I no longer had the courage and the strength to stand behind this child. And finally, they gave me the certificate I needed, but the worst was yet to come. Again, Gitti was there when my doctor issued the referral for the surgeon in Hagen and sick note for my employer. This was issued in duplicate. One copy, which contained the reason why I was on sick leave, was sent to the social insurance, and the other one, which didn't contain anything about the cause of disease, was for the employer. For it was no concern to the employer which disease one had. Unfortunately, I confused the 2 notes due to all the chaos, and as down as I was, without realizing it. Thus, the false note landed on the desk of my boss, which had fatal consequences for me. On the evening before the surgery, I wept bitter tears, but Kitty was with me and assured me that I was not alone. She would be by my side until it was over. We had brought Kathy to Kitty's parents. They were the only ones initiated, and like Kitty, they didn't condemn me for what I was going to do. In the deep of my heart, I absolutely didn't want to do it. Even Kitty, who understood only too well, couldn't calm me down. I couldn't sleep that night, listening to an inner voice, speaking over and over again, "Don't do it. You can still turn back." I believed I even felt the baby.